Hey, this is Tom from tdjacobs.com, and I get questions all the time about synastry regarding the true black moon Lilith. Lilith synastry questions. So for about 2 months, maybe 3 months, I've had on my calendar Lilith synastry video. And every time I think to do it, I'm like, oh man, just not in the mood, or seriously, Venus and Libra on the ascendant, my hair, right? I don't feel like I look good for a video, whatever it is, or I could, whatever, some kind of torment with my Pluto Venus in the 12th is in my eyes, and I'm like, oh no, I don't want to do a video. Anyway, today, completely inspired to do it. I can finally cross this thing off my list to give you an idea of what to look for when you're talking about one person's planet, another person's Lilith, or two people's Lilith touching each other, or in aspect in some way to each other. The first thing to say is that I use the true black moon Lilith, or the osculating apogee. If you use the mean position of the true black moon, you are in essence asking a blow-up doll what a woman is like. You're asking a Barbie doll to tell you what a woman is like. It doesn't work. Don't do it. You're wasting your time if you use the mean position. They can vary up to 30 degrees in a birth chart. So you might be lucky, like mine, for example, my mean position is 28 Scorpio. My true position is 3.5 Sagittarius. So it's 5.5 degrees. So interpretations for me wouldn't be terribly different, except the sign is different. But as far as what it's aspecting, there's some stuff in common. There's some overlap. You might be lucky. It might be close. But I encourage you to look up the true position, the true black moon, not the mean averaged position. As I write about in Lilith Healing the Wild, apparently this is people's favorite book. This is people's favorite book, if I can say that, of mine. Like, I always promote a lot of different books, but Lilith, I don't have to say a word about it because people are craving this information on healing the natural feminine and expressing it and being healthy and honoring nature and our bodies. And so as I talk about in that book, there are several arguments. One, for using the mean position over the true, but if you think the true black moon position is too erratic to use, then you understand nothing about Lilith. Again, asking a Barbie doll what a woman is like. A blow-up doll is my favorite image. So on how I often draw up charts is on astro.com, their free chart selection. It doesn't show up automatically, but when you go to extended chart selection page, you have some options. Scroll down beyond below the chart style, what chart you're drawing up, right? Natal or transits, progressions, whatever. Go down below that, and there are two things I want to put your attention on. One is a text box on the lower, almost at the bottom on the left, that has a list of a bunch of things, including some asteroids and now some trans-Neptunian objects and centaurs and stuff like that. And I think now they've added some fixed stars in there you can select in a text box. If you choose the Lilith in that one, you're getting the mean position, the blow-up doll. Don't do it. Go down below. I'm trying to be really emphasizing here. Go down below to the other box, which is longer and wider, and it says other asteroids and other bodies or hypothetical points, whatever. Put in there H13, and the chart that comes up will show the true black moon as OSC period capital L. That's the true black moon in your chart. Do not use the average. Okay, so that's out of the way. Lilith represents the natural wild. As I said, the natural feminine, I said a few minutes ago. What can't be controlled, what does not want to be managed, is how the natural masculine, which is control-oriented and managing-oriented, looks at it. But really, it's the instinctive inspiration. It's a very embodied lower chakra wisdom, essentially the wisdom of the earth, of nature, of the natural cycles of the world, and ever, coming up into our body. When we live with Lilith in intentional ways, we listen to our bodies. We don't fear what our bodies will tell us. We trust our instinctive responses. So we're talking about biochemical hormonal responses is a huge part of what Lilith wisdom is about. I can't explain to you why something is right for me if my inner Lilith is vibing yes or no. I can't explain it. It's pre-verbal. It's instinctive. It's animalistic. Often when we use that word, we use it in this patriarchal culture as a negative. I'm pointing to the mountains of Tucson, this patriarchal culture. But saying that we are animals is a natural statement of fact we need to lose our problem with accepting. So when I talk about living with Lilith, and this is really important for setting up how Lilith and synastry works, I can't explain to you why I need to do this thing or why I can't do that thing with you or for you. I can't explain it. I just can't do it. And it's this deeply in my body, in my biochemistry. It's an aversion or an attraction, and I can't always explain it. Over time, I can get to know those responses. I can trust them. I can make proactive decisions based in this instinctive wisdom. But that takes some time, effort, and a lot of trust, and frankly, a lot of personal work to overcome a default thing about Lilith. The default thing is that many people are afraid of their instinct and they suppress it. Somebody says to you, you got to meet my friend Jim. He is just amazing. He is the best Jim ever. And you say, sure, I'll meet Jim. You get to where Jim is, you take one look at him, your skin crawls, you're like anxious, you're angry, you can't deal with him. You cannot even deal with being in the same room as him. Or you're sitting there for 5 minutes and you're just like, he doesn't smell objectively, but there's something coming off of him that I can't be around. So the smell of a person energetically, but it's really hormonal, pheromonal, right? Biochemical, glandular. This is not right for me. So most people suppress that stuff, and people say, hey, that situation, that job, that move, that relationship, it's great for you. And your skin crawls, all your organs are stirring like this is wrong for me. Some people use their brain to override that instinct. So some people live Lilith in a self-trusting way, and they're autonomous, and sometimes they feel lonely, whether they're in a relationship or not. They might trust their bodies. They might really have a clear relationship with the foods they eat and how they approach healthcare, how they approach the body. Do they image and treat the body through kind of the allopathic medical approach, which has grown out of a kind of a Newtonian cause and effect, the body is a machine kind of logic? Or is it a series of systems and an organic being that is constantly responding to its environment, just like animals and plants? So these are kind of the ways that we can live a life in healthy ways. Or do we suppress it and override that with the logic of the linear mind? So when we get into relationships, Lilith synastry, you have to take into account, you can't say, what does it mean that her sun is on my true black moon? Which are the questions I get. But this is it's not a real question yet, because I can't answer that without knowing how you do your sun or how she does her sun and you do your Lilith. So I'm trying to point out this, variety of ways of doing Lilith. Because if you, let's say we're talking about somebody else's planet on your true black moon Lilith, on your oscillating apogee, right? H13, right? OSC period capital L. If you suppress instinct, if you fear being controlled by others, if you don't listen to your body, someone else's planet activating your Lilith can create a lot of stress and inspire you perhaps to suppress yourself even further. If you don't honor Lilith, someone's planet activating your true black moon Lilith may inspire you to go deeper into the hole of patriarchal suppression. Can't be feminine. If you're feminine, you're awful. If you're a woman, you're worthless. Like that whole kind of thing. If you change, you're not dependable, you're unreliable, you're erratic. These criticisms from the masculine mind, whether in men or women, but the masculine mindset to the feminine mindset, right? Masculine wants to shape things and control and direct things and manage things. Feminine just is. So, right, masculine's always trying to create a container, And the feminine energy just is. And that's natural. In every person, there's a unique balance. But in all situations, this is true. There are two kinds of energy. So if you hide your Lilith, somebody else's planet touching your Lilith may feel like criticism, control, suppression, pushing you into weird situations where you deny who you are. From a spiritual perspective, you can look at that as helpful because it inspires you to say, enough, I have to honor who I am. I can't hang out with your friend Jim. I can't eat that asparagus, whatever, whatever you like. I can't go to that kind of doctor or go to that or receive that kind of treatment, or I can't take the birth control pill because it fucks up my hormonal system. You have this sense of I can't do that, but people can push you into that. And we should be grateful for how they stir us to get to know our instinctive, autonomous, wild natures even better. If you honor your own instinct and you are living with Lilith in a healthy, conscious way, and there are people out there, so I'm not assuming that if you're watching this video, you're messed up and suppressed. You might not be. I meet Lilith people all the time. I am one. I meet them all the time. Then somebody else's planet aspecting your Lilith may make your instinctive response come to life, may make your lower chakra wisdom get more fine-tuned. You may have to say no to that person because your Lilith is feeling into the energetic vibration of things and your biochemistry is responding. Your energy field, your emotions, your body, your biochemistry, your hormones, your glands are responding to that person's pheromonal, hormonal output. So what does it mean that your Mercury is on my Lilith? I don't know until I know how you do your Lilith. So that's why I wanted to do this kind of video to help you understand these possibilities. I'm not going to go through every planet in this video. This is not a cookbook kind of approach. Maybe I will do that in the future, but I definitely want to plant the seed in your mind about how these aspects can happen. I do want to talk about the aspects a little bit, but I'm not going to go through the whole list of planets and possibilities. I want to give you an idea of that to get you started. I hate doing cookbook stuff. When I do it, I list stuff and I'm like, well, then it's the square and then it's the trine. And I get so bored with that because I want you to think, I want you to make connections. But I will say that when another person, when person A's true black moon Lilith is conjunct or next to, and I would say within 8 degrees, that's kind of the orb I would use for a conjunction like this in synastry. Another person B's planet, conjunctions are direct stimulation or infusions of energy. So essentially, my Lilith and your Mars or your Sun or whatever, your planet and my Lilith, that planet of yours, that part of your psyche, will push my Lilith button, again, for better or worse, but it all depends on how I deal with Lilith. We'll push that button constantly. Think about, I first heard this from Kim Falconer, an astrologer in Australia, who says, think of people as permanent transits. And if you think about a transit to a planet, it's, a conjunction is putting energy in there, and that planet typically is filled with energy, or that point in this case, true black moon Lilith, and then has to respond or is infused with life in some way. Because Lilith is so much about our instinctive yes-no response that we can't reason out and can't explain. Sometimes somebody's planet on your Lilith makes you incredibly averse to that person or incredibly hungry to be around that person. Lilith is a kind of a primal craving, or a need to primally connect, or a primal aversion and being repelled or repulsed by somebody. If the person's not right for you, you know it immediately. Yeah, so I'm very Lilith, so I have these stories, but I'm gonna hold back. So that's a conjunction. The person's planet who's not Lilith infuses energy into the other person, and the Lilith person is inspired to respond. But it's like being around the other person, person B, will always make the Lilith person have to make instinctive decisions one way or the other, or presents the opportunity for the person to continue suppressing instinct, which can, of course, lead to person A going a little crazy and feeling Lilith hidden in there. A sextile, I don't tend to focus on sextiles and trines too much because you would never come to me for a reading for any reason regarding a sextile or a trine, but I'll just say it here. Sextiles are about 60 degrees, and I would use an orb of 6 degrees. That's pretty typical in astrology. Use that kind of orb for a sextile. It's stimulating. It triggers. I think of it as tickling or poking, where the person receiving that that treatment has to respond. And I also think of it sometimes like this, like you're reading a book and your friend across the room, it could be very soft, saying, hey, I wanted it, hey. And it goes on until you have to respond because you're just doing it. So it's stimulating and triggering. It can also be, yeah, go do that. Yeah, do it. Like your own personal cheerleading squad in the form of perhaps one person. So somebody's planet and somebody else's true black moon Lilith, it can trigger that suppression response or that yes-no instinctive, I love this, I hate this response. Like there's an instinctive triggering, a triggering to instinct. Typically sextiles are these, between people, sometimes can result in these really dynamic exchanges of, I thought about this, and the other person says, you know what, that makes me think of this, and that's awesome. And then the first person says, you just answered a question, and you didn't even know I had asked that question 3 years ago. And you have this kind of back and forth thing that tends to be positive, tends to be fun, right? Tends to be, egging each other on to good things. Moving on to the square. Squares are about 90 degrees. I would use about 8 degrees on the orb between people, especially like in synastry charts. And the square is about tension, pressure, and friction. Essentially, each body in a square, or in this case, a body in a point, says to the other one, you're doing it wrong. Planets and points and square to each other have different ways of doing things. And you can go all the way around the wheel. This is actually a really fruitful path of inquiry to get your astrological mind's juices going, to think astrologically, because you realize that Libra has something to say to Capricorn, and Capricorn also has something to say to Libra. And then on the other side, Aries says something to Capricorn, and Capricorn also has something to say to Aries. And so there's always a sense of, you're doing it wrong, do it this way. And the other person says, I'm just doing it the way I'm doing it. So this can go several ways. One is, why are you always contrary? Why don't you just eat what we're eating? Thinking about like a kid who can't stand to eat what the family eats. Maybe there's a Lilith response to that. Just eat what we're eating. Just do what we're doing, right? Instead of figuring out how this unique response is generated and what it really means in the person who needs to be unique. A square to Lilith can also say, like, somebody can pressure this person not to be unique, or not to listen to the self, not to be autonomous, not to say yes and no, or to say yes and no for different reasons or in different ways. There's pressure and tension. I think of it like tectonic plates often, where they're pushing against each other, but it's not like an opposition is, we'll get to that in a minute, is more like pressing against each other directly. A square is like from the side, from the angle, something tends to slip. This is probably the 60th video out of the 80 videos I have up here where I make that hand motion about squares. It's really important to realize, because tension has got to give. Something's got to give. So between Lilith, my need to be autonomous, and your planet, there's some tension. Now, squares can be very instructive, because somebody can say to you, hey, I don't know if you realize this, but you're doing this thing this way. It may sting and feel critical, but it may be wonderful information. And so true black moon Lilith squaring somebody's planet can inspire that planet to stop nonsense and say, hey, you know what? You could just make that decision quickly. You could just trust your instinct. That's a no-brainer, right? Just say yes or no. What do you feel? And that can, in a square to that person's planet, that can be tension. It can not feel so good. It can feel critical. So it depends on if people trust each other. It's very important for people to trust each other, because you can say, hey, here's some squaring info, and the other person can say, wow, that really surprises me that you would say that, but I appreciate your perspective. That's also a square with, you're doing it wrong. Why do you always do that way? You're doing it wrong. And it all comes down to, again, how the Lilith person does his or her Lilith and how the other person does his or her planet that's in aspect. Because if you feel that you can't be autonomous and can't make your own decisions, if you're the Lilith person in the synastric dynamic, then somebody else saying, why are you doing that? It may feel like criticism and a threat. You may be on the defensive often with that person if you don't feel like you can relax and be vulnerable to receive constructive criticism, which is a lot of what happens with a square. A trine indicates that two energies are kind of speaking the same language. A trine can be out of sign as well, which kind of alters it a little bit. But more or less, most trines being within the same signs, or fire signs, or air signs, water, earth signs. They speak the same language. Whatever one is doing, the other one may support it and say, I think you're doing a great job. Now, if you are suppressing Lilith, somebody's planet trining your Lilith might say, yeah, I think you should keep your mouth shut. That's support for what that Lilith is already doing. It's not what we think of as support if we're trying to, honor the natural divine feminine and trust the instinctive wild and whatever. But those planets are kind of like, yeah, go ahead and do what you're doing. That's cool. You could be harming yourself with your Lilith. You could be absorbing all kinds of crap and hating authority figures for controlling or harming, abusing, molesting you or whatever, or making you fear your own wisdom or something. And the authority figures could be like, yep, that's the natural order of things. We don't want Lilith. So they're speaking the same language kind of. But if you are the Lilith person and you trust instinct and you choose your food and vegetables based in that lower chakra wisdom and pheromonal, hormonal, biochemical, glandular wisdom, then the other person's Lilith can feed you positive data and encouragement. Like, yeah, I think you should say that thing. I think you should speak up. I think you should, trust yourself. So a trine is more supportive. Whether you're doing something happy or unhappy, it tends to be supportive in some way, like feeding energy, boosting energy in that direction. The opposition is about 180 degrees. I mentioned the trine is 120, and I would use 8 degrees on a trine. So moving on to the opposition, again, 8 degrees on the opposition, 180 degrees. They're obviously, two things opposing each other. I said with the squares, and my hands are habitually coming. With a square, it's like, they're pushing in opposite directions and something's got to slip and tension is, sometimes it blows up in your face. Oppositions are more like things that disagree and have opposite ways of doing things that can hold tension in place. Now, oppositions can come out as, hey, I can see something about you that I think you might not be able to see. Can I offer you this reflection? It might help you, though you might not, you've never thought this before about yourself, but here's how I see you. Or it can be kind of a critical, alienating, judging, unfun thing. So those are the two ways that we kind of experience opposition. Sometimes we can feel confounded and blocked. Like, I can't be myself because you're opposing me. The way somebody looks at you and you stop that joke in your tracks and you feel awkward and really weird, that's an opposition, But also, again, somebody's saying, hey, I think that, this might benefit you. Can I share it with you? And gentle, trusting, it's all good. It's also possible. When a planet opposes Lilith, the true black moon Lilith, the oscillating apogee, that person's planet has the opposite ways of doing things and reasons for doing things than your instinctive wild. So you might find, again, sticking with this idea of two kind of possible unfoldments, the ways things can unfold. If I'm doing my Lilith and I'm instinctive and I'm letting myself do my thing and I'm trusting it, it might make you uncomfortable with you have a planet opposing my true black moon Lilith. because you don't understand why I'm doing it. You can't put yourself in my Lilith's place. And then you might say to me, I don't understand why you always do this. And that can be, and I think you should stop it, or can you help me understand that? Like the rest of the thought can be, I think you should stop doing it because it's asinine, or can you help me understand where you're coming from? And those are kind of two ways we might experience that with Lilith. If you don't speak up for yourself, if you're not autonomous, if you don't trust your biochemical, energetic, physical, emotional reactions, and somebody else's opposing way of doing something might inspire you to keep your mouth shut, but then something may fester. Because you may want to say to that person, can I reflect something to you about how you do this thing? But you might hold yourself back too. So oppositions, I believe that with these what are called challenging or just difficult aspects, squares and oppositions and even conjunctions sometimes are considered difficult aspects. A conjunction goes either way, and people talk about them being fourth harmonic aspects, being difficult. I think that trust is really important. I think that, with all these aspects. So for you to trust yourself and your own Lilith, and then for you to let other people trust themselves and their own Liliths, and then to figure out how to work together. Because most of your life, you are running things with your linear logical mind. Well, that's in this part of your body. Lilith resides in root and second chakra, the lower part of the body. The root and second chakra are pre-verbal. They're about communication. The root's a lot about receiving input from the environment, including the groups of which we're part and family. The second chakra is when we begin to reach out to other people and form relationships with people we're not related to, one-on-one relationships. But all that wisdom the Lilith wisdom is down there. And most of us run our lives with our brains, and our brains want to eliminate what can't be controlled. Wants to control everything. That's what the brain's job is. And we have grown into, or we have devolved into trusting our minds and only our minds, and then having our bodies, our emotions, and our spirits really messed up because we don't work on holistically. We don't look at ourselves as entire systems of biological, spiritual, business. So many people are up in their heads trying to control what really doesn't want to be controlled, including their own bodies, right? With Lilith and our bodies, we want to work with our body by listening to it. So, between people, we really need to be cognizant of how each person does Lilith, and then all of us strive to do it in a more healthy way, in a better way, recognizing that our brains will want to control us out of the unknown. And so when you're looking at how your Lilith affects another person in synastric analysis, well, you chart overlay, right? My sun, your Lilith, your Mercury, my moon, whatever. When you look at that, be really aware that you have both tendencies within you. You probably favor one or the other. Favoring Lilith and honoring Lilith, or denying Lilith and being a control-oriented, human control freak, brainiac control freak, logic addict, something like that. Realize that you have both parts of you, and so do other people. So when you look at certain synastric connections, realize that certain individuals that you're going to hang out with or might want to look at your charts together, they're going to bring out your Lilith in a positive way like nobody else ever has. And the same with you. You might bring their Lilith out. So anyway, that's the end of this video. Just an overview to give you some ideas and some ideas on how to approach Lilith, the true Black Moon Lilith, in synastry. Thanks for your time and energy. You can check out what I'm up to at tdjacobs.com. And I will suggest also that Lilith Healing the Wild, it explains my whole approach to Lilith, including an extensive cookbook section on Lilith in the houses, signs, and aspects and transits and progressions. And I also offer the Lilith Intensive, which is a multi-hour MP3 set that goes in depth into the themes and astrology of Lilith. So thanks again. Check out what I'm up to at tdjacobs.com. Bye-bye.